Hey everyone, we are out in the desert today, and there is a lot to take in. Believe it or not, there's actually grass behind me over there, but it is indeed a desert. Now, while there is a lot here, huge vistas and landscapes, we're actually going to test out something completely different today, a brand new lens from Canon. This is the RF 100-300 f2.8L I.S. USM, and it is a monster of a lens. It's constant f2.8, it is an L lens, and it is the first truly all-new design of a super telephoto for the RF system. So 100-300mm f2.8 constant, that's a serious lens. That opens the door for a lot of opportunities when it comes to freezing motion, because let's say you're doing sports. Now, you're not going to get something that's very far away, like a huge open field, but indoor sports in particular are where this lens could excel. When I say indoor, we're talking things like tennis, basketball, some hockey, and of course things like fashion on the runway, where you don't need a huge range, but you can get perfectly close from relatively close distance to the actual action. Now, if you do need that extra reach, if you're trying to get all the way in with this lens, you can use the 1.4x and 2x teleconverters. We do have them here. We're going to give them a shot. Now, that'll get you 200mm to 600mm on this lens, and at the 2x, that'll get you a 5.6 aperture. So still very, very good. If you have sufficient light, you can definitely crank the ISO and still get a reasonable shutter speed, and you'll still be able to get that frozen action that you need. Now that, of course, brings you into the territory of something more outdoors, possibly even some wildlife photography. So we're gonna take it for a spin out here. We're on a trail, so we got a lot of vegetation, some small animals, bugs. Obviously the mountains are not really in the cards here with this lens, but it's still a beautiful sight to take in, so join us for the walk. All right, so I've been out here for a little bit now, and I've had my hands on this for some time. It's big, it is, but it doesn't feel as much as it looks. It's honestly not that bad. Now, I do have the teleconverter on here. This is the 2X, and I'll show you why in a sec, but just so you know, this is a 5.7 pound lens only, of course. With this is the R3. We're just under 8 pounds. So all in all, on this hike that I'm on, it's not that bad. And I can easily hold this handheld. You know, I've been keeping it rested on my hand almost the entire time. Now, since we're talking handheld use, we of course have to talk about stabilization, since this is a telephoto lens. This has 3 modes of stabilization, and they're all internal optical. This gets you 5.5 stops of optical stabilization. Now, if you pair that with a body that also has stabilization inside, you get 6 stops. Now, from what I've seen so far, the focusing has been fast, responsive, and very consistent, especially when I'm tracking. I've had a couple of shots with Nick where I followed him across the trail, and it's held up no matter what. And as far as close focusing is concerned, your minimum focusing here is 5.9 feet. So only for the plants over here have I really had an issue, but otherwise I've been able to get just about everything. So 300 gets me a long way here, but you know, there are some very far out details on the mountains if I want to get some of the real textural surfaces of them, and 300 just won't quite cut it for that. But luckily we have the 2x extender here, and that gives us 600mm of reach. Now, what does 600mm look like? Well, it's a little hard to convey out here, but we actually happen to have another ridge right over there. I had Nick walk out before, and you can see that it's quite the distance. Now, we're not talking close-ups, of course, but you can get him, you can make out who he is, and you can clearly see just how far the lens reaches. And also, I took a couple of shots of the mountains around me, and you can really just see the detail, the rock formations, all the structure that's in those faraway shots. So let's talk some specs here, especially in regards to optical performance. Remember, this is a brand new design. We've got 1 fluorite element, 4 ultra dispersion glass elements, and 1 spheric element. And that's of course also coated with air sphere coating. So you get really consistent edge-to-edge sharpness all around with this lens. And I've noticed that at all focal lengths, by the way. So 100-300, it is razor sharp all the way through. And we're talking optical performance that honestly rivals Canon's own primes, including their EF 300mm f2.8L. Now that's a legendary lens in its own right, so users of that will know what kind of performance we're talking about here. And you can see for yourself in some of these shots, you know, I'm zoomed all the way in, and it is just tack sharp. Before we wrap things up, let's talk a little bit more about the externals of this lens, the body itself. Of course, you see that there's a hood on here, and I'm holding it largely by the tripod foot, but we have 3 rings. Now the main ring, of course, is our 100-300mm zoom ring. moves pretty smoothly. This is ahead of the focusing ring, and that's a design choice to accommodate the optical design of the lens. So behind it is the focusing ring, feels buttery smooth. Now on top here, we have a control ring. This can of course be declicked if you bring it to a Canon service center, but it does come with clicks by default. Now on the very top of the lens here, you'll notice that there's one more ring. Now this is not a moving ring. This is a rubber enclosed ring that has 4 different function buttons. And depending on the camera that you attach this to, you can have a different number of customized functions for these buttons. So on the EOS R3 that we have here, for example, you can have up to 70 customized functions. Now, just to be clear, each of these buttons has the same function depending on what you assign. So it's not like you can have different functions on all 4. And that's so that depending on the orientation of the lens as you're shooting, you can hold and grab different versions of the control buttons. Now, moving to the back of the lens, you'll see that there's a button here towards the body of the camera. This is for focus preset and recall. Users of other super tele Canon lenses will know about focus preset as a way to lock in a focus point. We didn't demo it here, but just so you know, this is an entirely new design using a single button on the back. So that is it for our time with the Canon RF 100-300mm f2.8L I.S. USM lens. This was a beast of a lens. The constant f2.8 is a little bright out here, so I didn't really get to push it that way. And yes, I do wish I had some width for the mountains here, but I got beautiful shots. Some of the portraits here are insane. The separation and the compression that you get in the subjects are just crisp, buttery, beautiful. The optics are great. And it handles perfectly out here. I've been walking around all afternoon and it hasn't tired me out. It feels great in the hand. I am sure that shooters of, like I said, indoor sports, fashion, portraiture, some wildlife, they're gonna love this. It's a perfect lens for them. If you are really looking for the highest end of the super teles in this focal range, look no further. So let us know how you can use the RF 100-300mm f2.8L I.S. USM. I'm Doug with B&H, and I'll see you next time.